Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Wayfinder series. I've got my friend, Dr. Tanya Pergola here, who is an amazing doctor of psychology. She has done fantastic things in the world helping people. She's got a nonprofit in Africa called Terawatu she can tell us about. She leads healing safaris to Africa. She even has a home in Africa and also in Florida. I originally met her in Florida. She's also a teacher at Rancho La Puerta, where I've been teaching for 25 years now. And she also has written a book, which won a book award. It's called Time for Cows. It's all about the wisdom of the Maasai. So welcome, Tanya. So excited to have you here. The reason this is happening is because the other day we were talking and she had so many interesting things to say about our crazy world right now from a sociology perspective. And I said, oh my God, I got to interview you, got to share you with my peeps out there in the world. And so for starters, first of all, welcome. But for starters, can you just explain to people what a sociologist is? Because a lot of people, I don't even think many people know. Am I right in assuming that a lot of people don't know?
Well, especially in the United States, we get a lot more coverage in Europe and in Africa. I don't know why that is actually, but sociology is the study of society, broadly speaking. And my PhD is actually in sociology, macro sociology, actually, which is looking at the big shifts and transformations that happen throughout history of the world, economic, political, cultural. And then my minor was in social psychology, which is looking at how those shifts in the world impact individual psyches in your individual self, and how our individual selves can then impact the larger world.
Wow, it's perfect. So it's different than anthropology. And can you explain the difference between those two?
Yeah, anthropology has always, well, traditionally has always looked at traditional cultures, and more modern anthropologists are looking at um, modern worlds. There's a lot of similarities, but we use a lot more statistical data and different kinds of research methodologies. In other cultures, like in the UK, sociologists are often lumped in with social anthropologists. So there's a lot of similarities. It's a study of society and culture.
Right. So the other day when we were talking, because you have this background of understanding the Maasai of Africa, you were telling me about when the elders get to a certain age, there's sort of an appropriate thing that they do. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because it came up during the time when Biden said he was going to step down. And I thought what you said, how you phrased it was so interesting. And no one in the news talks about it the way that you were describing it.
Yeah, and it's not only in Africa, it's also in India too, where there's just a lot more awareness and seriousness about our life stages, starting from birth, the cycle of life, and from birth through childhood, you behave a certain way, you play and learn things from your parents, and as you then approach, like with Maasai, as you approach sort of teenager years, you would go, both men and women go through initiations. And I could talk about that for a long time. There's some good and bad qualities of that. And our organization works a lot to sort of harness the good parts of that. But essentially, you're moving from this childlike childhood into a adulthood, where you're becoming warriors, you're becoming responsible adults, and you're taught these things from your elders. Then you spend the next part of your life, really producing and being a householder, being a person in society. As you age, then it comes a point where you move more into what, is honored in so many of these cultures, elderhood, where you're sharing your wisdom from all those years. And when we were talking about Biden, it was painful for me to watch, because his debate, his everything, because he shouldn't be doing that job now. He has so much wisdom. He has so much experience. He should be sharing that and should be respected for sharing that. And they weren't talking about that aspect of it. They were talking about, you know, medically, what's wrong with him, this and that. I'm like, but psychologically, you should be respecting him and figuring out a way how to harness all that wisdom.
Right. So when he stepped down, it was from a sociological point of view, that was the appropriate thing, because you're not supposed to be the warrior prince when you're 80 years old, that. And when what would happen in a different culture if that happened more often, where people get mixed up with their roles in the social scheme of things?
Well, it's all mixed up right now, because there's been plenty of, I'm thinking of Mugabe in Zimbabwe. He never stepped down. He was 90 something. But that was very much getting ideas from the West, the leaders of different tribes and so forth. They bring in others, younger people, to help them lead and manage. They're more of the wisdom keeper and someone godfather type thing, a godmother, a godfather. Yeah. So it is a little mixed up, and I think we should have a age limit for some things, just as we have a lower age. And when we do that, it has to be very clearly communicated that's, people say that's ageism and this and that narrative has to change. There's nothing to be ashamed of to be an elder. It's something to be revered and respected and not shamed.
So I didn't realize for running for president, there's an age requirement on the lower end.
There is, I think it's 45, 40 or 35.
Really? Well, I didn't know
Yes.
that. So someone in their 20s is not allowed to run for president.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I haven't checked in a while, but I think there is yes, it's
But
a law.
that's really interesting, because if you're going to do it on one side, you should do it on the other. And the other thing that I really feel strongly about is that whoever runs for office, they should have to pass a geography and a history test, because we're not allowed to get a driver's license unless we know the basic rules of the road. And I just think it's kind of crazy not to have something like that in place too. Because a lot of our culture, and tell me if you agree with me, I think the United States is very much into celebrity Hollywood kind of stuff, that we like as a culture. We like charismatic, entertaining people that make us laugh. It's I don't know if you agree with me about that, but in our culture, if you're an athlete or an actor or an actress, you're going to have higher status in our social world than if you are a PhD in psychology or someone who's a real intellectual. It's just it's a cultural thing, I think. Do you agree with me?
Yes, and it's hard to untether that from our media and our, our how people get information now. It's not as interesting to listen to a sociologist talk than it is to see someone sing or play
Perform.
sport, perform. Yeah.
Right. Right. But even look at the income level between a teacher and a major league baseball player. It just, I think that it's just gotten a little lopsided, that we actually should spend more time revering teachers and elders and honoring our history too. A lot of people who are young right now, they don't even know about US history. So anyway, that's just a
Yeah.
whole other can of worms to open. But what else can you tell everyone out there about this crazy time we're living in? Because you have some really interesting thoughts about all of it, about the rise of women right now, and just feel free to just dive right in.
Well, thank you for asking that. I was thinking a little bit about this. So, I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff happening all over the world, but I think from my understanding, what we wanted to sort of talk more about here is the crazy political
Yes,
landscape.
yes,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So I need to go back just briefly in history. Because I don't think a lot of people know this. I was teaching political sociology at the University of Washington in Seattle in 1994. And I was teaching back then articles and books about how the United States political system was essentially never really was a multi-party democracy. And certainly by 1994, it was even less of a multi-party democracy, meaning that many parties. We had only two in many recent decades,
Mm.
the Republican and Democrat, and none of the other ones really got anywhere. By 1994, the Democratic and the Republican Party were essentially, if you looked at their policies, sort of the two sides of the same coin, would be a cliche. There wasn't much differentiation, very, very little on policies, on economics, on security, education, sort of the things that the governments are supposed to sort of take care of.
Mm.
Because of that, it was predicted 30 years ago that these two parties were going to have to differentiate themselves on something else other than what traditional political parties did. So we predicted back then that in the coming years, those two parties were going to focus on cultural aspects, societal aspects, things that we talked about in sociology, race and gender and women's rights and civil rights and all this social, we call them social problems back then. I think they still are. And sure enough, that's sort of what has come to be. And I was reflecting on this earlier. It's quite insane, really, that 30 years ago, we had two parties that were identical in many ways. Yet 30 years later, we are so polarized. Everybody using the word polarized. How can you be polarized about something that was the same 30 years ago? How did that happen? And that is what is fascinating to me, that we've now come to a point where all the conversation, you turn on the news, you look at the newspapers, whatever, we're talking about individual presidential candidates, individual people. Yeah, now and then they'll say, oh, well, this is what the policy is. This is what but that's not what people are focused on. They're focused on the people's personalities and people's history and their characters. It's not about that. So it's quite, I wanted to share that because I think that helps to lay the groundwork for how we got into this crazy space, because it is a lot more entertaining to read news about people's character and their personality like it's a telenovela, a soap opera. It's a lot more
Entertaining, that's the
Uninteresting.
word. Yeah, hold on.
Uninteresting.
So the entertainment factor is a huge thing, and that's massively true right now, for sure.
But does that make sense that
Yes.
okay. Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that because um it's a lot more gets a lot more emotional, gets a lot more so-called crazy when you are discussing people's character and their words and their performances. All those things are a lot more malleable and uh subjective than looking at people's records and their policy statements and things like that.
Right. So this happened pretty quickly. It didn't used to mean
Yes.
politicians. It used to be they were kind of boring people who were mostly white men talking about how they were going to change things with policies. And now it's like a slugfest of just, it is like entertainment, because you can't even believe the stuff that comes out of everyone's mouths these days.
Yes.
So how the heck did that happen? And it doesn't feel terribly healthy.
I wouldn't say it's healthy at all. And the sad part is I'm not sure how to put that toothpaste back in the tube. I think I don't know when I think Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky situation
That was the start.
that was one of the first starts because I viewed Bill Clinton as somebody who um he had his good and bad parts, but if you think you know the bell curve, uh,
Yes.
statistical bell curve. If the United States is so far from a bell curve because we have so many little subcultures. But if we did have a bell curve of the society, we have these extremes that are never going to change. But then in the middle, if we lump people together, Bill Clinton seemed like he could be somewhere in the middle to represent
Mhm.
America. Like I said, good things and bad things, but the Monica Lewinsky whole crazy story corresponded with the rise of the internet. And it
Oh,
was
right.
interesting that Al Gore, his vice president, brought the information superhighway.
Mhm.
Remember that?
Yes.
It was him that really helped spread the internet for good and for bad. Um, and it was the internet that really I remember reading the Star Report, it was like the first thing that you could find online, and that really started awareness about, or the, not just awareness, but attention to things other than one's policies. Um, and then Obama really shook things up, mainly because of his race. And people started to look at things, putting more attention on things other than policy. And yes, the internet and social media just exacerbated all these things because it's more interesting to talk about character, like I said, than policy.
And also it's sort of bite-sized entertainment. You get little snippets of this and that. And now the other incredibly frightening thing is AI, because now people can say, well, so and so never said that. That was made up. That was a fake video. Or I just like, that's scary too, because are we all being fooled I don't know. What do you think about AI? From a sociological standpoint, I bet it's hard to wrap your head around that one.
Yeah, and I have a lot to say about it, but I remember talking about it for the first time actually with my dear friend in South Africa. He's one of the I knew him and his wife through TED, the TED community, that we were hosting TED Africa for a while. Um, we were talking about AI, I want to say it was 10 years ago, and I didn't really understand it quite then, but I remember having this very heated debate with him over a glass of wine. I was like, I got very upset because he was basically saying, Tanya, you don't realize where we're going with this.
Hmm.
And I run a safari business in Tanzania, and he gave this example. He said, fairly soon, Tanya, people are not going to need to go on your safari. They're going to be able, this was right when those glasses came out, he
Right.
said the virtual reality. He said they'll be able to put these things on. They'll be able to see everything that you are going to show them in person. They're going to be able to smell it. They're going to be able to taste it, everything. And people will no longer have to be moving around to travel. They could do it all from their sofa. And there was something about that whole concept that just pissed me off. I was like, not just from a business perspective, because I like running these safaris, but I just felt that there was something sad about that whole thing. Fast forward 10 years later, I think it's doing incredible damage to a lot of things. And everybody always says, but there's good sides of it too. Yes, maybe, but I still don't see how the good side is weighing out the bad side. I'm glad I'm not teaching at a university right now because my colleagues are really they've stopped giving papers, assigning papers to do because they can't discern what is actual people writing versus chat GPT. Um, maybe some medicine has some positives, but what I'm most concerned about, in addition to how it's shaping people's minds, is that if we are going to go back to some kind of economic policy, and that's what some politicians are talking about, that it's going to be better if we have so and so as the leader, as president. You know what? Nobody can stop what is happening right now, and it's very hard for me to see what people are going to do for jobs in the very near future. I mean, I just don't see how we're going to have, but not everybody can code, you
Right.
know? So it's,
Do you think people will go back to trades like learning to be a plumber or an upholsterer or someone who fixes your shoes? I mean, all of these things that you do with your hands, we still need people who have a craft, and we don't have a lot of craftsmen. We don't even have many schools for craftspeople.
they claim that they're going to be able to do that with robots.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, even surgeons, they could do,
Surgeons all robotic.
yeah.
A lot of surgery is robotic, and a lot of people now are saying that that's better than humans because of the human error. When I listened to, I was listening to BBC the day that was it 2 Fridays ago when the crowd strike,
Oh, the collapse of all the
cybersecurity.
airplane things, yeah. Airline.
Well, it was a
Microsoft.
cybersecurity. Well, it was CrowdStrike, a cybersecurity company that was, I believe, releasing a update for Microsoft. It wasn't Microsoft, it was
Okay.
CrowdStrike. And when they were interviewing somebody on the news at in cybersecurity. Basically, they said, sounded like what happened. I'm not a techie, but what happened is that it was humans who were programming this update,
Okay.
made the mistake. And that person specifically said, if AI had been creating that update, this wouldn't have happened.
Wow, I didn't hear that. Well, I guess in that sense, there are some good things about it, but like you said, what will happen to people if they don't have jobs? How will they make money?
Yep. And that's
What
where,
what happens then? We don't have any historical example of that ever.
no, no.
So what do you think would happen?
Well, that's sort of where we're in the middle of this shift right now. I think it's a massive shift. There's been a few voices that have talked about universal basic income, finding some way to redistribute the wealth. I've been criticized a lot for that word redistribute. It sounds like communism, socialism, whatever. And I don't know why people have that not understanding of that word, because it's that incorrect use of it. But there has to be some way to reorganize society. I don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime, but that's what I see where we're at right now, that we are no longer, and this has been breaking down for a while,
Right.
where you go through school, you get your college degree, or you get a degree, you get a job, you work, you buy a house. That whole thing has been breaking down for a while. And there's no going back. There's no going back. So something has to be restructured.
Do you have any idea what it could be? How to restructure?
Now that you bring it up, I haven't, I think that the closest voice I've sort of heard that's even starting to talk about this is I just read Infectious Generosity
Oh, I love that.
by Chris Anderson, the founder of TED.
Okay. That's good.
He's actually giving out these books. Everybody needs to read this book. He has a whole movement. It's called Infectious Generosity. And he makes a point, sort of starting with the premise that, let's see if we can use the internet for a good thing. And he has many examples of very wealthy people who are who have been giving back and are starting to give back, and how to spread that,
Mhm.
how to spread that. And then also even people who are not super wealthy at all, but are part of networks who give a little bit, and how those can help people.
Mhm.
So that, I haven't really reflected on that from a bigger picture and answering your question, but that seems like some beginning of an answer, where here we're all sitting on planet Earth and there's plenty of resources, plenty of money, even though that's not backed by a gold standard. There seems to be enough people who agree that there's lots of money. How do we just start to share a little bit more? Because the people that I see in small villages in Tanzania when I'm there, who don't have water, who don't have food, and I'm living here in Miami, where there's people throwing away food and more water than we know. There's got to be a way to make it all a little more balanced.
Do you think that food and water will end up being the most valuable currency we have eventually?
Well, it was actually my first mentor in East Africa, Wangari Maathai, who said that. she said water. She said that the next world war is going to be around water. And she
And I
said
could
this
see
in the
that.
90s. She said this in the 90s. Yeah.
So I remember when my dad was alive, he used to be so shocked that people would buy water. Like this was, water was always just get it out of your sink. So it's a big, big industry. And now with the oceans getting in the rivers and everything, there's so much pollution. And with global warming, I mean, the whole way the planet is changing, I just think water is going to be super valuable, like gold, especially in places. Think about Arizona and desert areas. Just
Mm-hmm.
what would you give for water if you don't have it? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So tell everybody what you think about the placement of, she hasn't been nominated yet, but Kamala Harris in terms of being a Black female. What from a sociological perspective, is this something you could have anticipated? And are there signs of what this is about? How do you place this in the context of things that you've studied?
Well, some of the first thoughts I had when her name was coming up, I thought back to, and it wasn't that long ago, it was Hillary Clinton, which was 2020, right?
Yes,
No, 2016,
2016.
2016, just 8 years ago. Seems like it
That
was.
seems like 50 years ago.
Yes, yes. But 8 years ago, I remember the first text I got from my team in Tanzania the morning after the election was, I guess the United States was not ready for a woman yet. And I was a little surprised by that quick or short comment, because here we were all busy talking about so many other things, whether Russia interfered with the election and whether about her emails, about all these other things. And for people in Africa, it was, well, yeah, I got messages from South Africa, Tanzania, Kenya. I can't say all of Africa, but all those messages, basically, they were focused on, you're not ready for a woman. So that was the first thought I had when they started saying Kamala Harris. I said, oh no, are we ready yet? It's 8 years later. I thought about her first as a woman, not the other demographic points. And that made me start thinking that yes, she's a woman, but I almost didn't even, she felt like a very different kind of woman than Hillary Clinton. So I started thinking through, like, how was she different? And I remember during Hillary Clinton's campaign, she reminded me so much of some faculty I had at the University of Washington. They were women who were of that first generation of feminists, where they had to in many ways become men in order to get where they went, where they were able to go. They had to behave certain ways, they had to say certain things. They in order, and that I was a student of social movements too. So that often happens, when things are changing, you have to go to the extreme to wake people up before you sort of pull things back. And during the feminist movement, women tore down everything. It's like, we can do it. We can become like we can do anything a man can do. That was the slogan. It wasn't, now looking back, we didn't do such a great job, women, I'm saying, and we, in explaining how we could be who we are as women. It was really, how can we be who we are by not being, by tearing down men. And so I don't know if you remember at the time, but there was a lot of criticism of Hillary for not being emotional. Do you remember that?
Yes, she felt stiff.
She felt stiff. It didn't surprise me, because in that generation, you couldn't cry as a woman. You couldn't show emotion, because then you're a woman.
And you're an emotional, high-strung woman.
Yes, right. So she had to be, it didn't surprise me. So that's a lot about social psychology, right? It's not just about Hillary. It's about
the generation of women,
the people that she learned from, the people that her social psychology, her identity was formed within a milieu at the time. So people couldn't warm to her, so and so. Fast forward now 8 years later, now we have we still don't know that much about Kamala. I know that she was the media. I only saw her on short clips of the media showing her. I remember laughing a lot.
Mhm.
They took her totally out of context. We didn't know what she was laughing about. It's just, oh, she shows emotion. She shows laughter. Again, now that's being criticized as a silly woman. She shows emotion more than Hillary did. But what kind of emotion? You can't win. You can't cry. You can't laugh. So I think we're a little bit further along.
Than 8 years ago.
I think we are, yes. And the fact that she's not a white woman, who my colleagues that I knew my teachers at the University of Washington, my other faculty members, they were all white women of the feminist era. I know I have a lot of Jamaican friends here, a lot of Black women here, and I, having lived with Black Tanzanian women for 15 years, there's a very different, going back to what I said earlier, that initiation, that being raised as an African woman is very different than being raised as a white woman in the United States. She was raised in Kamala was raised in the United States, but her mom was from India and her dad was Jamaican. And I think she, like I said, I'd love to sit and talk with her about these things. I think she is embodying a very different persona as a woman. And the fact that she doesn't have biological children. She has stepchildren.
Right, which is another thing.
Yeah.
So do you think it's we're going back, part of the reason for the very high level of emotion around these candidates is because there are a lot of people who are not really comfortable with people who are female or who are Black and different. I mean, a lot of times this occurs because they actually have never traveled or ever known one. Like, there are a lot of people, I know a lot of people who have never had a Black person as a friend. It was where I grew up outside of New York City. I went to a school where I was the minority. So I grew up surrounded by little Black kids all the time. So for me, I just have no concept of that they're any different than I am. But I realize that I'm very, very unusual for certain groups of people in this country. And from their point of view, if you don't know something and you've never met someone, you tend to let stereotypes guide you rather than your own visceral opinion about something. Does that make sense?
For sure, for sure. And it is hard for us to imagine how that is because we've been around and had that exposure. But, you know, I think that so much of this is based in fear, you
Yes,
know.
I agree with you, and I can understand their fear, because if you don't understand something, you've never had any exposure to it, it can feel scary. Just like diving off of a high diving board it's a human thing to be scared to do that. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to jump and hopefully land in this water, not hurt myself. Like there are things that are just, if you don't know something, you've never done it before, it will cause fear. So I can't blame them for being afraid. It's just, I don't know. I just think it's interesting how when humans are not open and they don't travel and experience all things of life, it's easy to get more rigid with your thinking.
Yes, and I was remembering when my soul brother, my co-director, Masai Solulu, we co-wrote this book together, and we worked together for 25 years. He's a Masai from Ngorongoro, and he came to Seattle when I was living there for a fundraising event that we did, and then I took him around a few other cities in the U.S. to do to work, and I remember, you know, Maasais are just so instinctual in helping others. You know, they there's no thought at all. It's just like they see something, someone in a need help, they go directly to it without passing go. It's just like, I need to help you.
I need to move there to live with them.
I know, it's amazing. It's
I feel
amazing.
right at home because unfortunately I have that tendency. Anyway, I have the right profession for that, right?
Yeah, but
People. So anyway,
I
tap
remember
in.
a few incidents. I could write another book about this where we were on an airplane, and it was a last minute booking, so we didn't have seats together. And he was sitting like across the aisle from me, and a woman came in, a white woman came in, and was trying to put her carry-on up in the thing, and he immediately jumped out of the seat. He was in the middle seat to help her, and she yelled at him, "I can do this myself. Sit down." And um
Wow.
she was clearly afraid of a black man helping her. You could see that, you know. And then they had to sit together for 2 hours because he was right next to it. And she, you know, wanted to not talk about it, you know, because it was like this, she, I guess, felt shame. I don't know. But he wouldn't let it lie. You know, he was like, "What happened?" He didn't know what happened. He didn't
So
know.
he innocently tried to talk to her.
Yes.
And what happened? Did she end up
They
connecting with him?
talked the whole time. And he introduced her to me when we landed, and he had told her about our organization in Tanzania and this and that, and she explained why someone like herself is afraid.
She admitted that she was
She
afraid of
was
him.
afraid.
And why did she say it was? Because of the way she was raised? Was she from the South?
Yeah,
Someplace where
she wasn't used to a black man talking to a stranger, like yeah,
okay.
yeah. It was amazing how that whole thing happened. And then like a few days later, we were having Mexican food together in Seattle, and a little child walks, little white child walks up to him because he has this big heart, you know. And he was like, "Give me five," or whatever. And the mom's like, "Come back here, come back here." And I said, I'm really sorry. He's from Tanzania. He's he's used to, I said this to the mom, I said, he's used to all kids are everyone's kids. And she's like, where's he from again? I said, he's from Tanzania. He's a Maasai. They believe that all children are everybody's children. And we had this great conversation. She gives me the phone number. So Lulu takes that little boy because they did karate together and they spent like 3 days together.
Wow. So it's like in the little, it's just baby steps. It's just the same thing, introducing children to nature. So I've worked with a summer camp in the Poconos where they take teenage kids from the inner city and put them out into the country, and they're terrified of nature. They don't know what's in the woods and they just have no exposure. So I think one of the most important things going forward is if in schools they could do a better job of just helping to grow more well-rounded children who understand nature and humans and just being more humane.
Yes.
I think teaching human beings how to be humane would actually be a good thing to include in all curriculum. I don't know where we're headed now with all of it. Do you have any parting words of solace for people who are freaking out right now about many things? No matter what side of the political aisle someone's on, everyone is upset.
Well, I think you just said it. We need to go back to our humanity, our when everybody has, so many people have lost the plot, and there needs to be coming back and a coming back to who am I? What do I want? What am I grateful for? And how can I serve? How can I help others? And because those questions are so rarely reflected on by a lot of people, people answer who am I by what they read on the social media and in the press. That's who I am.
Mhm.
I'm like that person. They don't take the time to reflect on being a good person, being compassionate.
I don't think that has a lot of strength right now. I think it's like jungle law where people aren't really thinking about others or thinking of what can I get from me first before someone else gets it.
Yeah.
I don't think compassion and empathy is high on, for some people it is, but for a lot of people, I think they're thinking, how can I get more so that I'm going to be safe and taken care of, despite, whatever's happening to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And where it reminds me of being out on safari during the dry season.
The
you know,
animals fighting
with
for.
animals. Yeah, there's no water during the dry season. You have to fight for food and territory, and it's a devolution in many ways.
Right. And
But
it's not only because environmentally we literally have less water. It's not really a crisis for most of us now, but I think there's this fear out there that if we don't take care of ourselves first, someone's going to take it from us. So everyone becomes your enemy as opposed to someone you want to help.
But I think that people need to just take a moment and reflect. That's on the what do I want? Like what is it that I really need? When you say if people are afraid that people are going to take from me, what do you think they mean by that?
Just that it's survival of the fittest, that there's a limited amount of whatever it is that you think you need. And if you don't grab it now, you might not get it later. It could be anything. It could be a job. It could be cheating, like you said, in schools, using chat GPT to write your paper rather than yourself. Why are you doing that? Because you can get ahead and beat somebody else out. Or in the Olympics, doping, so you could beat somebody else out. That feeling of I gotta do what I've got to do to stay on top, no matter what the price. That, I mean, I think that's also just human nature too. It's just like we've turned more into animals rather than like more evolved people. And I think part of the problem is that people don't feel spiritually connected like they used to. It used to be the churches had a bigger role in communities, but then with all the priests doing this and the pastors doing that and all the news there,
Yes.
it's very salacious. So then where are the spiritual leaders? We have Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, but you know, we don't even really hear about them too often. I don't feel like most people feel that their souls are getting fed. And I think that is, in my opinion, is what causes them to be grasping. They're grasping for things. I got to get that job. I got to get that car before somebody else buys it. And that house, we're going to fight for the, you know, to put the highest bid in for that house before someone else gets it. I just feel it everywhere. Just
Yeah,
that.
and I've said this for years now, that people have replaced, and this was one of the first courses I taught at University of Washington, which was sociology of religion. And the US was one of the first countries in developed countries in the world that were losing people affiliation with traditional religions. And you know, there's a difference between, yes, religion and spirituality, but still having that connection to something, a community that does espouse more universal humanity and truths. Losing that completely, many people have replaced that with the president and the presidential candidates and the political leaders have become their
Yes.
religious leaders,
Yes. Isn't that
which
it?
wasn't the job. There was a mixing of institutions. Why should everything from deciding what a woman does with her family planning and all these things that used to be in the church and used to be, we used to have a separation of church and state. Now it's all bleeding into each other, and that's a very dangerous thing, going back to what we started with. It's one thing to talk about politics and the economics and the security and education, and it's a whole other can of worms to talk about values, beliefs, um spirituality, the soul. It's just two totally different um worlds. Your values should inform other things, but you shouldn't be arguing the values in the political sphere. That's a different arena.
So no wonder everyone is confused and stressed out, because what's happening is things are up topsy-turvy, bleeding in and out. And other than that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I figured as a sociologist, having you at least explain it so that we don't feel like we're going crazy. There is something about human beings that this makes sense. And a lot of the behavior we're seeing is due to the stress, right?
Yes. And I in January, when I wrote my vision for 2024, I don't do resolutions. I do intentions for the year. I specifically wrote, this is a national election year, Tanya. Wear your sociology glasses as much as possible. Don't get sucked into the drama of the day to day. And I knew this was in January. I knew what was coming. And when you when you get pulled into the drama of it all, it is stressful. It makes you crazy. But if you can step back and watch the whole thing like a movie, that's why I wanted to talk about the little bit of the history, you know, just observing this as a moment in time of the bigger picture and taking the time to reflect on, you know, who am I? What do I want in my life here? And then let the politics, the what's going on in the world with other wars and so forth, you know, when I say watch it like a movie, I don't mean to be dismissive
Mhm.
or you know, I like one of my teachers is Deepak Chopra. He uses the word detached in a very healthy way. You can have your intentions and desires and what do you need for your own life to stay healthy, mind, body, spirit. You know, that's the most important thing, because if you're not healthy, you can't do anything. What do you need for yourself to stay healthy, mind, body, and spirit? Set those intentions and then be detached from the outcome.
Right.
Anything can happen.
It's true. And we're probably going to be surprised with whatever, because everything is quite shocking. So if people want to get a hold of you to learn about your healing safaris, they can just go to your website. That's just your name, right?
Yes, tanyapergola.com.
Okay. And you also have yoga that you do yoga retreats too, and you teach yoga in Miami, right?
Well, I'm currently teaching on Zoom,
Oh,
so
cool.
you
All
can
right,
join
good.
from anywhere.
Oh,
Yes.
that's awesome. Okay, good. Well, I hope that people will look you up, and your book they can buy on Amazon, or if they want a
Yeah.
signed copy, they can get it from you directly, I'm sure, right?
Yes. Just send
Awesome.
me an
That's
email.
good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I just think, like I said, I started this series to try to figure out ways we can all start healing. And I have so many interesting friends like yourself. So I'm just sharing my pals out with the bigger world. So thank you so much. And
Hope
hopefully
it
I'll
was
see you.
useful. Hope it was.
And
Uh,
absolutely. You're always so interesting to talk to.
okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Tanya.
you, Leslie.
Bye.
Bye.